The eviction notice had my parents' names at the top. I read it twice before the words finally made sense. They weren't warning me, they were suing me. The house I had lived in for 8 years, the one I paid rent for every month, was suddenly being reclaimed so my younger sister could have her first home. My lawyers said we could fight it, but before I even responded, something unexpected happened. During a courthouse meeting, my 7-year-old daughter raised her hand and said something so simple that the entire room stopped talking. And in that moment, a case my parents thought was easy began falling apart. The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon, mixed in with normal mail. Zola almost ignored it at first, thinking it was another bill or advertisement. But when she saw the official stamp on the front, something felt strange. She opened it slowly while standing in her kitchen, her daughter playing quietly in the living room. The moment she started reading, her heart dropped. The paper was not a warning, it was a legal notice. Her parents were asking the court to evict her from the house. For a few seconds, Zola thought there had to be a mistake. She read the letter again, slowly this time, trying to understand every word. But the message was clear. The document said that the property legally belonged to her parents, and they now wanted it back. According to the filing, they needed the house for her younger sister, Rafi, who wanted to begin her life as a homeowner. Zola stood there in silence, holding the paper in her shaking hands. This was the same house she had lived in for 8 years, the same house where she raised her daughter. Every month she paid rent exactly on time. When something broke, she fixed it. When the roof started leaking during the rainy season, she paid for the repair herself. When the old plumbing stopped working, she hired someone to replace the pipes. She treated the house like her real home, not just a temporary place. And now the same parents who asked her to live there were taking her to court. The notice said she had 30 days to leave the property, 30 days to pack up 8 years of her life, 30 days to find a new home for herself and her little girl. Zola felt a mix of shock and disbelief. Her parents had never even talked to her about this decision. There was no conversation, no warning, no attempt to find a solution together. Instead, they had gone straight to court. In their explanation, they said helping Rafi own her first home was important for her future. But standing in that kitchen, looking around the house she had cared for all these years, Zola couldn't understand how her future and her daughter's home suddenly mattered less. What hurt the most was not just the lawsuit, it was the realization that her own parents believed removing her was the easiest solution. 8 years earlier, the house looked very different. When Zola first walked through the front door, the place felt quiet and forgotten. Dust covered the floors, the paint on the walls was fading, and several things inside the house needed repair. The roof leaked during heavy rain, and the plumbing in the kitchen barely worked. It was clear the house had been empty for a long time. At that time, Zola was searching for a stable place where she and her young daughter could live. Her parents owned the house but had no plans for it. Selling it would take time, and leaving it empty meant it would slowly fall apart, so they suggested a simple arrangement. They told Zola she could move in. The idea seemed easy for everyone. Zola would live in the house, pay rent every month, and take care of the property. In return, she and her daughter would have a safe place to stay. Her parents said it would help the house stay in good condition instead of becoming damaged or abandoned. Zola trusted their words, so she agreed. At first, the house needed a lot of work. During the first rainy season, water began dripping from the ceiling. Instead of complaining, Zola paid to repair the roof. She believed it was part of taking care of the home. Months later, the old plumbing pipes started leaking badly. The kitchen sink stopped draining properly, and the bathroom faucet barely worked. Again, Zola hired workers and paid to fix the pipes. Little by little, the house slowly improved. The walls were repainted, broken windows were replaced. The yard that once looked dry and neglected slowly became green again because Zola spent weekends cleaning it and planting flowers. She wanted the house to feel warm and welcoming for her daughter. Over the years, the place became more than just a building. It became the home where her daughter learned to walk across the living room floor. It became the place where birthdays were celebrated at the small kitchen table. It became the safe space where Zola worked hard to create a stable life for her child. Every month, the rent was paid without delay. Every repair was handled responsibly. Zola believed she was helping both her family and herself by taking care of the property. Because of that, she never imagined the same house she worked hard to maintain would one day become the reason her parents wanted her gone. For many years, nothing about the house seemed to cause a problem in the family. Zola lived peacefully with her daughter, paid the rent every month, and kept the place in good condition. Her parents rarely mentioned the property. Whenever the topic came up during family visits, they simply said they were glad someone responsible was living there. Everything changed when Rafi began talking about buying her first home. Rafi was the youngest in the family, and everyone often described her as the one who needed the most support. One evening during a family dinner, she proudly announced that she was ready to start a new chapter of her life. She said she wanted to become a homeowner and finally have a place that truly belonged to her. At first, the conversation sounded normal. Everyone congratulated her and asked questions about her plans. But as the discussion continued, the parents started mentioning the family house, the same house where Zola had been living for 8 years. They said it might be the easiest solution. Instead of searching for a new property or helping Rafi look for houses on the market, they began thinking about giving her the one they already owned. To them, it seemed simple. The house already belonged to the family, and helping Rafi start her life there would save time and money. What surprised Zola later was not just the idea itself, it was the way the decision was made. Her parents never called her to talk about it. They never asked if she could move or if there was another solution. They never discussed the years she had spent maintaining the home or the money she invested in repairs. Instead of a conversation, they went directly to the legal system. The eviction notice arrived without warning. When Zola finally spoke to them, their explanation sounded calm and practical. They said they loved both daughters, but Rafi needed the opportunity more right now. According to them, Zola had a stable job and could eventually find another place to live. Helping Rafi become a homeowner, they said, was the most important thing at this moment. To them, it was simply a family decision, but for Zola, the message felt very different. It felt like 8 years of responsibility, payments, and care for the home suddenly meant nothing. The home she believed was part of her life had quietly become someone else's opportunity. After receiving the court notice, Zola did not panic. She knew she had done nothing wrong. Still, she wanted to understand her full position clearly, so she decided to meet a lawyer and go through everything step by step. She carried a large folder filled with papers, receipts, and bank records. It was heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. At the lawyer's office, she explained how long she had lived in the house and how she had always paid rent on time. The lawyer carefully checked her payment records. Every month was documented. There were no missing payments. This showed that she had followed the agreement fully for 8 years. Then they looked at the repair receipts. Zola had saved every invoice. When the roof was replaced, she had paid for it. When the plumbing system was upgraded, she had paid for that too. There were also records for painting, window repairs, electrical fixes, and garden work. None of these costs had been returned to her by her parents. She had covered them all herself. The lawyer explained that these improvements were important. They did not just keep the house livable, they also increased its value. A new roof makes a property stronger and safer. Updated plumbing makes it more modern and attractive. Clean walls and proper maintenance raise the overall price of a home in the market. Zola began to understand something she had never thought about before. Even though the house legally belonged to her parents, her money had helped improve it. Without her repairs and care, the house would not be in the same condition today. Her investments had added real value. The lawyer told her that this situation was not simple. Because she had proof of long-term rent payments and major improvements, the court might look at her contributions carefully. In many cases like this, financial investment can affect how a judge views fairness.
Zola felt a mix of emotions. She had never tried to claim ownership. She only wanted a stable home for her daughter. But now the numbers showed a clear picture. Over 8 years, she had spent a large amount of money on a house that she might soon have to leave. The financial records did not change who owned the title, but they changed the story. What once looked like a simple eviction had now become a situation filled with documents, proof, and important questions about fairness and responsibility. After the shock slowly settled, Zola decided not to act in anger. She knew that crying or arguing would not help her in court, so she chose to stay calm and focus on facts. She told herself that if this case was going to happen, she would face it with proof, not emotions. The first thing she did was open every drawer and cabinet in her home. She searched for old papers, receipts, and bank statements. She also checked her email and phone for messages about the house. She remembered that over the years, she had kept records of almost everything connected to the property. She had done this because she believed in being responsible. She collected proof of her rent payments. Each month's transfer receipt was saved. The records clearly showed that she had paid on time for 8 full years. There were no gaps or late payments. This was important because it proved she had followed the agreement from the beginning. Next, she organized all renovation invoices. The folder included bills for the roof repair, plumbing upgrades, painting work, window replacements, and other improvements. She placed them in order by date so the timeline would be easy to understand. Each paper showed her name and the amount she had paid. She also searched for messages between her and her parents about the house. Some conversations showed discussions about repairs. In those messages, her parents had thanked her for taking care of the property. These records showed that they were aware of the work she had done. When she met her lawyer again, she brought everything in neat folders. The lawyer carefully reviewed each document. He explained that in court, details matter more than feelings. Long-term payments, major improvements, and written records could show strong tenancy history. This kind of evidence might influence how the judge views the case. The lawyer also explained that courts look at fairness. If someone has invested time and money into a property for many years, the judge may consider that contribution before allowing eviction. It does not automatically change ownership, but it can affect decisions. Zola felt stronger as she prepared. Instead of feeling helpless, she now had organized proof. She understood that her calm approach would help her more than any argument. Every receipt, every message, and every record became part of her defense. By the time the court date approached, Zola was not just a tenant facing eviction. She was a prepared woman with evidence in her hands, ready to explain her side clearly and respectfully in front of the court. The first meeting in court felt serious and quiet. Zola sat on one side with her lawyer. Her parents sat on the other. Rafi was also present, looking nervous but hopeful. The room was not loud, but the tension was clear. Everyone knew this meeting could decide what would happen next. The mediator explained that this session was not a final judgment. It was a chance for both sides to speak and try to find an agreement. Then it was time for the parents to explain why they filed the eviction. Zola's father spoke first. He said the house had always belonged to the family. In his view, it was never meant to be permanent for Zola. He explained that when they allowed her to move in years ago, it was to help her at that time. Now, he believed the house should support another child in the family. Her mother added that Rafi was ready to start her life as a homeowner. She said this was an important step for her future. According to them, giving the house to Rafi would bring stability and happiness. They believed family support should help the daughter who needed it most right now. They also said Zola had a stable job and a steady income. Because of that, they felt she could find another place to live without difficulty. In their argument, they focused on legal ownership. The house title was in their names, and they believed that gave them the right to decide. They did not talk much about the money Zola had spent on repairs. They did not mention the years of rent she had paid. Their main point was simple. They owned the property and they wanted it back for another daughter. Zola listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not raise her voice. She only looked at the papers in front of her and waited for her turn to speak. The atmosphere in the room felt heavier as the discussion continued. The parents repeated that helping Rafi was their priority. They believed they were acting in the best interest of the family. To them, it was a clear decision based on ownership rights. But in that courtroom, it became clear that the case was not only about a house, it was about different views of responsibility, fairness, and what family support truly meant.
When it was Zola's turn, her lawyer stood up calmly. He did not speak with anger. He only carried a thick file of documents and placed it on the table. The room became quiet again. Everyone watched as he opened the folder. First, he showed a clear timeline. It started from the day Zola moved into the house. Each year was written down carefully. Next to every date were records of rent payments. The paper showed that Zola had paid every month for 8 years without delay. There were no missing payments and no excuses. The documents proved she had kept her agreement fully. Then, the lawyer showed the repair invoices. One by one, he explained the major upgrades. There was proof of the roof replacement, which stopped the leaks during heavy rain. There were receipts for plumbing repairs that fixed the water problems in the kitchen and bathroom. There were bills for new windows, wall painting, electrical improvements, and other maintenance work. The lawyer also pointed out that some of these repairs were not small. They were structural. That means they made the house stronger and safer. These kinds of repairs usually increase the value of a property. The mediator listened carefully while reading the copies of the documents. Next, the lawyer showed records related to property taxes and other payments connected to the house. In some years, Zola had contributed to costs that were not originally part of her rent agreement. She had done this to make sure the house remained in good condition and fully functional. The mediator began taking notes. He said that the value added to the house through these improvements was important. When a person invests money in a property for many years, it changes the financial situation. The house was not the same as it was 8 years ago. It had improved because of Zola's work and spending. The tone in the room slowly changed. Before, the discussion had focused only on ownership. Now, the documents showed contribution. The clear timeline made it hard to ignore how much effort and money Zola had put into the property. The parents looked at the papers in silence. For the first time, the case did not seem simple. The evidence showed that this was not just about who owned the house, but also about who helped build its value over time. While the adults continued talking about papers, ownership, and legal rules, the room felt tense and serious. Zola sat quietly, listening carefully to every word. Her parents were speaking about rights and decisions, and the mediator was asking questions. It felt like a battle of documents and arguments. No one was smiling. Everyone was focused on the case. In the middle of all this, Zola's 7-year-old daughter was sitting beside her. She had been quiet for most of the meeting. She did not fully understand the legal words, but she understood something very important. She understood that the house was her home. It was where she slept, played, and felt safe. As the discussion continued, the little girl looked around the room. She watched the adults speak seriously. She noticed how her mother's face looked calm but tired. She also saw her grandparents talking about the house as if it was just a building. After listening for a while, she slowly raised her hand. Everyone stopped talking. In a soft and innocent voice, she asked a simple question. She said, "If we fixed the house and paid for everything, why do we have to leave?" Her question was not loud. It was not angry. It was honest. She was not trying to argue. She was only trying to understand. The room became very quiet after she spoke. The mediator stopped writing. Zola's lawyer looked up. Even the parents looked surprised. For a moment, no one knew what to say. The question was simple, but it touched something deeper. It reminded everyone that this case was not only about legal ownership, it was about a child's home. It was about stability, comfort, and security. The little girl had grown up in that house. It was the only home she remembered clearly. Her words changed the feeling in the room. Before she spoke, the focus was only on rights and documents.
After she spoke, the atmosphere felt different. The adults began to think about how the decision would affect a young child. The question did not solve the case. It did not change the law, but it changed the mood. It made everyone realize that behind every paper and rule, there was a family and a child who simply wanted to stay in her home. After the little girl asked her question, the room stayed quiet for a moment. Then, the mediator returned to the documents. He carefully reviewed the rent records, repair invoices, and proof of improvements. He compared the dates and the amounts. He wanted to understand the full picture before making any suggestion. The mediator explained that this situation was not as simple as it first appeared. The house legally belonged to the parents, but Zola had proof that she had lived there for many years and had invested a large amount of money into the property. Her payments were not small. They were regular and long-term. The repairs were not minor either. They included important structural work that made the house stronger and more valuable. Because of this, the mediator said the case needed to be looked at carefully. When a tenant improves a property in a serious way, the value of the home can increase. In this case, the records showed that the improvements were significant. The house was in better condition now compared to 8 years ago, and that improvement was linked directly to Zola's spending. The mediator then suggested a different solution. Instead of forcing an immediate eviction, the family could consider compensation. This would mean that if Zola had to leave, she should be paid back for the value she added to the property. Another option could be a structured buyout. That would allow the parents or Rafi to take full control of the home, but only after agreeing on a fair financial arrangement. This suggestion changed the mood in the room. The parents looked surprised. They had expected a simple decision, but now they were hearing about possible payments and legal responsibilities. They had not fully considered how Zola's investments might affect the outcome. The mediator explained that the court often considers fairness in long-term cases. If one party increases the value of a property through documented contributions, the situation becomes more complex. It is not just about ownership, it's also about equity and financial impact. Zola did not speak. She simply listened. She knew she had always followed the rules. She had paid rent and handled repairs honestly. Now it seemed that her careful record-keeping mattered more than ever. The case that once seemed straightforward had become detailed and layered. What started as a simple eviction request was now turning into a discussion about compensation, value, and responsibility. The parents realized that ending the matter would not be as easy as they first believed. After hearing the mediator's suggestions and reviewing the full financial records again, the parents began to understand the real situation. What they thought would be a simple eviction had turned into a serious legal and financial matter. The documents clearly showed that Zola had paid rent for many years and had invested a large amount of money into the property. If the case continued, the court could order compensation for the improvements. This amount could be very high. The parents discussed the matter privately. They realized that moving forward with the lawsuit might cost more than they expected. It could lead to payments they were not prepared to make. It could also create more tension inside the family. After careful thought, they decided to withdraw the eviction claim. The decision changed everything. Instead of continuing in court, both sides agreed to sit down and negotiate a fair solution. The meetings were calm this time. There was less anger and more listening. The focus shifted from winning the case to finding a balanced agreement. With the help of the mediator and lawyers, they created a formal written agreement. This document recognized Zola's long-term rent payments and the money she had spent on repairs and upgrades. It also clearly stated her rights as a long-term resident. The agreement ensured that she and her daughter would not be forced to leave suddenly. The lawsuit that was meant to remove Zola from the house ended in a completely different way. Instead of separation, it led to a new understanding. The family arrangement was rewritten, not through loud arguments, but through careful review of facts and evidence. In the end, it was not anger that changed the outcome. It was proof. The records, the timeline, and the honest details showed the full story, and one simple question from a child helped remind everyone what was truly important. Ownership was no longer just about whose name was on the title. It became about responsibility, contribution, and fairness. The case closed with an agreement that protected Zola's efforts and gave her daughter the stable home she deserved.